Okay. Hey, everybody, and welcome to a virtual coffee lunch and learn. This was something that was started like fairly early on in this community when one of our members, Brian Healy, was like, hey, this is a thing that we do at my workplace sometimes where people just have some time to share on anything that they would like to. And it's been wonderful. We've been doing it ever since. And today we're especially excited. We have Jessica Wilkins back again to tell us even more about open source. She had a wonderful lunch and learn the last time talking about how to get things started as a maintainer and tools to make that process as easy and as wonderful and enriching as possible. She is here again for even more updates and more information as we are right about to dive into Hacktoberfest at the time of recording. It is Friday, the 29th of September. Hacktoberfest, or kickoff, is going to be on Monday, the 2nd. So we're really looking forward to that. Who is Jessica Wilkins? She is an amazing person, but also she is a self-taught developer and a technical writer from Los Angeles. In her previous career, she was a professional oboist, gotta say that correctly, educator and owner of JDW Sheet music. Her interest in programming came during the pandemic when she wanted to build the Black Excellence Music Project, which celebrates Black artists from the jazz and classical fields. Now she works for freeCodeCamp and just one of the more prolific technical educators that I have seen. So I'm always really excited when Jessica is ready to share because I always learn amazing things. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Jessica. Jessica, take it away.
Cool. All right. And without fail, right as this thing started, my cat was like, "Hey, it's playtime." so so now she's like rolling on the ground. But yeah, it's great to do another lunch and learn. And so this particular topic is really about, yes, she is helping. So this particular topic is really about like how can you use open source to help you achieve your long-term career goals. And so whether that's not only just breaking into tech, but growing your tech career and defining who do you want to be within tech and what kind of person you want to be, and also what kind of projects you want to do, and or maybe you want to start a business, maybe you want to start a consultancy, maybe you want to have a startup with a product that you're really interested in. Or maybe you want to become kind of you're really interested in a particular area, whether it's accessibility or testing or particular front end or back end and whatnot. And how can you get involved and kind of share, become like an expert within that field and people know you for that? How can open source help with that? So there's so many different reasons why people might want to get into open source. So we're going to kind of talk about all those different things and how you can align open source with your particular career goals. And so I'm actually going to share my screen here and I'm going to do desktop. Yep. All right, cool. And let's go hide these tools there. Let's see. Yeah, let's go hide those. All right, cool. So I just have a few things pulled up. And so right now I have pulled up the open source. For those of you who are not familiar, I know Becca works there and Nick works there. And so this is a tool in a community that will help you get started with open source or open source, and also help you find really cool projects. And so this is a helpful tool. So I'm currently signed in, but it's like free to sign in there. And you can kind of explore different projects. So we'll be kind of referencing this throughout the presentation. But yeah, so as Kirk mentioned there, this is me and this is my actual GitHub profile there. So I started back learning how to code back in 2020 and getting really involved with open source, and it's really helped shape my career both as a technical writer and then also as a programmer. Do the different projects I'm involved with, particularly with freeCodeCamp and other projects that I'm really passionate about. And so let's start off with, we're going to go through a couple of situations of why people might be interested in open source and how you can actually use that and utilize that to better your career. So one of the common situations is that people are newer to the industry and they're saying, okay, people keep saying get involved with open source, but I have no clue what that means. They're like, how do you even get started? Or like, how does that help my career? So we're going to talk about that first situation. So either whether you're new to the industry, maybe within a few months or a year or so or something like that, and you keep hearing this buzzword of like what on earth is open source and why should I care about it? And how does that help with my career? We're going to talk about that first situation, and then also pivot into how it can help grow your career. So maybe you've been in the industry for a few years, or maybe 10, 15, 20 plus years, but you're looking to kind of flesh out your career, go in different directions. How can open source help with that? And so the first thing is targeting specifically people newer to the industry. And I'm self-taught. And when I was first learning, I kept hearing the same thing, like, get started with open source. I was like, what does that even mean? And so my first thing is to join, if you're listening to this, you're part of Virtual Coffee, and but join a community, because you're going to have tons of questions. And you want to get started with a beginner-friendly repository just to learn the basics of the workflow. And so a lot of people say, oh, get started with, Meta's, React library, or get started with Angular, or get started with this or that. I would say start off smaller, because like even just the basic, instead of trying to tackle some large feature issue or some crazy bug within like the React library, like that could be a future thing. But for today, let's figure out, what does it mean to fork a repository? What does it mean to clone a repository? What does it mean to actually make changes? And so I have pulled up here OpenSauce. They have one of their beginner-friendly repositories called the guest book. And basically what this is once you've gone through, they also have a great open source course there where you can learn all the basics. And we're not going to go into depth on how to get started, but they have a great intro course here that you could check out and start to learn some of the basics and kind of work from there. But basically, pick repositories that are really, really small. Like, there's not a whole lot of files. This is not some giant monolith or mono repo with all these different projects. This is super, super small. And basically, it's adding your name to the guest book. That's the repository. But its purpose is to help you get you practice, get you started with understanding what does it mean to fork and clone and make pull requests and make changes, and what happens if you have conflicts or whatever. And so you want to kind of practice those basics first before you start tackling large issues. And then once you get the workflow done and you've contributed a few different times, then you can start to say, okay, what kinds of issues can I work on, and how can this help me get into tech? Or maybe you're in tech and you're in between jobs and you're trying to figure out, what do I do next? So the next thing that you're going to want to do is really identify, like, where do you want to work ideally? What kinds of companies do you want to work for? Are you interested in startups? Are you interested in consultancies? Are you interested in maybe larger tech companies? Like, what is your end goal there long term? What kinds of companies? And maybe you're not really sure, right? But the great news is a lot of these companies that I just mentioned, oh, she's back. A lot of these great companies that she's mentioned, or that we mentioned here, they have some sort of open source project. Even the big FANG companies, they have their own open source projects, or some larger companies have their own open source projects, and that's a way to get into it. And so one of the possible ways is if you go to OpenSauce and you log in with your GitHub account, then it takes you to this page where it has insights and explore, but you kind of explore different repositories. And so if you're interested, then find a project that aligns with the current technologies that you're working with, but really start to study what that project's about. So I'm going to click on repositories, and in real time, start to kind of look at what I'm interested in. So if you click on, so it's filtered by default by JavaScript, but of course you can change this. And it's filtered by most recent. And it's really cool because it gives you these highlights here of like activities. So you can see here, so these are all larger projects to start off with. Once you kind of got the basics down and whatnot, if you want to start contributing to larger projects, or maybe you're interested in one of these companies right there, like Firebase or something like that, you could start to see the number of PRs that they have, the frequency there, and start to just study. Don't just jump into an issue. Really start to study, like, okay, what's going on? So if I just click on, like, I'll just click on Swagger, which is a pretty cool, helpful tool if you've worked with like Node and whatnot, and Nest and stuff like that. And so what I would do is, if I was really interested in this tool, that I would just kind of study the overall environment. And most of these projects will have some sort of community. They'll have some sort of Discord. They'll have some sort of Slack group. They'll have something that you can kind of get a pulse on, like, what is this project about? What are their future goals? And I think starting with that, identifying, like, what are the company's needs? What are they interested in? What are they trying to achieve long term? Whether they're developing curriculums, whether they're developing products, whether, whatever they're developing there, start to analyze, like, where their values are. And so also looking through the issues, it gives you a good hint of like, okay, are they working to build new features all the time? Is it just the internal team, or are they, as you can see, there's a lot of bug issues right here. So maybe they just released something new. So this is a great way where you can start to kind of dive in and start to analyze and see like, okay, where are my unique skill sets and talents? How can I participate in that? So if your unique skill sets are in like testing, there's tons of repositories that need help with testing and writing unit tests and end-to-end tests. Or if you want to start to dive into some of these bugs here, and also if you're newer to the industry, learning how to read different issues, because not all issues are going to be created the same. Some are going to have very involved, like this. I'm just kind of reading through this in real time. This seems pretty involved there and giving a lot of information, but not all issues are going to be that way. And so getting used to like, what do you do in situations when, there we go. So what would you do in situations where there's not a lot of information and you're just like, I don't even know where to starting, right? So it's a lot of you are using open source as a way to start learning about how to work on a team, how to communicate with the team, how to deal with unclear requirements, because you're going to get unclear business requirements where you're like, I don't really know where to starting. And so this one's actually a pretty detailed issue, but there might be other issues where you're not sure where to get started. And another way that you can help out is with triaging issues. So if you're looking at certain repositories, you're like, don't feel super comfortable with code right away, but I want to get started with open source and I want to start working with different teams. A lot of people need help triaging different issues. So you can see here, there's this label on the side that says needs triage. And so some teams will have specific triage teams, and they'll open it up. I know like Forum is an example where they're asking for help with triaging issues. They're asking for help to moderate within the community. And same with I believe OpenSauce has on their documentation how you could get started with joining the triage team and helping out with that. And so if you're not entirely sure how to get started, then you can join the triage team and start kind of looking through different issues, start joining the community and understanding like how you can get started there, and helping answer some of these questions there once you've kind of played around a little bit with the code base and you've been involved with the community a little bit. And so that's a great way to kind of start getting involved and working on a team there and helping out and adding value that way. And so now at this point, once you've kind of identified like where you want to get started, whether it's with helping out with documentation, helping out with testing, helping out with accessibility, right? There's a lot of projects with accessibility issues. And so you might be a little bit of an accessibility expert. And we'll talk more into how, if you're looking to pivot your career into accessibility, and becoming kind of more known in that field, how open source could help with that. But just really identify like, what are you looking for long term, what to do, like whether it's just getting started, learning how to contribute, or just work on a team in general. So those are some ways, just getting involved with the Discords communities and Slack communities and discussion groups and joining the triage team, just getting involved with and commenting on issues. Another thing is helping out with reviews, right? So there's plenty of repositories that you might not be super comfortable with the actual issues themselves, but you're really good at reading the actual code and picking up. So I'll just pick up a random issue here, and you might be able to kind of read through this a little bit and say like, okay, this all makes sense to me. And you can start to kind of read through in real time, and you can actually leave reviews. And a lot of maintainers are really grateful for that, of people helping out with reviews and lending their expertise, because that's like one thing less off of their plate. And so you might not be super comfortable diving into the code base on day one, but you might be looking at something like this going, okay, I could review this, I could look at this and add my comments there. You might not be able to approve it and have that approval, take that might just be for the maintainers, but you can definitely leave your comments and say, hey, I had a question about this part, or this part seemed a little bit confusing, or maybe we could expand on this, or maybe we could use this method instead. So those are some ways that you can get started with open source and start kind of building out. What you want long term is to build out your profile, is like, what kind of programmer do you want to be, and what kind of value do you want to add within the community? What do you want to be known for, right? And so there's a lot of people that have built their careers on open source, a lot of big names like Kit Dodds and stuff like that, who have really helped accelerate their growth and profile within this industry through their open source contributions. And then they started creating courses and whatnot. And we'll get into if you're interested in like course or content creation in general, how open source can help with that. But those are some ways that you could get started. So start off small if you're new to open source in general, just new to programming in general too. And start off with smaller issues, find smaller repositories like within the open source repository or the freeCodeCamp repository, and then also reaching out to your community and say, hey, I'm brand new. I just want to get started, just gonna get my feet wet, just understanding the basic workflow, and then slowly but surely start to identify, what do I want to be known for? Do I want to be known more for front end or back end or full stack or within a particular library or framework? And we'll get into more detail on how you kind of separate yourself and start to align yourself with different libraries and frameworks that you're really interested in. But that's my spiel for those of you who are getting started within open source or just within the industry in general, how that can help. And I will want to stress, like, just joining a community, because there's going to be a lot of things that you need help with there and a lot of questions that you're going to have, and that's totally normal. But you just want to make sure you're part of a nice, healthy community like Virtual Coffee, like Open Sauce, like Eddie Hub, like Danny Thompson's community, like the freeCodeCamp community. There's so many Discords and Slack groups that you can join and be a part of to kind of help you along, and you can start to mold your career in real time and start to gain that practical experience, not only working on teams, but building out your technical skill set and your communication skill set as well. And so open source is a great way to kind of get started with that. And this is a long-term play. This is not something where you just make a couple of contributions or like, bam, I got a career. Like this is a long-term thing that we're going after for years and years. But if done well, then you can craft out the career that you actually want. So first, identifying what are your actual needs, and your needs might change over time. That's totally fine. You might say, look, I wanted to be in this area, but I want to pivot over into this area, or I want to pivot over here, and that's totally fine there. But yeah, so that's the first part for those who are looking to like get involved in the industry, get their first job, and then also build their profile and kind of stand out within the current marketplace, especially. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was, some of you might be interested in more like DevRel positions, or just become a full-time content creator. Maybe you love creating content, but you're like, how do I actually turn that into a career? Like, I want to make full-time money creating courses and speaking at conferences, but how on God's green earth do I do that? And so open source can help with that. And so one thing that I would do is I would find really cool projects that you're interested in and start kind of writing some content and building some really cool projects and sharing it. And so I'm going to pick on Redwood for a second. They literally just had their conference. I think it just wrapped like yesterday or something like that. And I know Becca was there and Brian Douglas was there. And it seems like a really good turnout. But this is a full stack framework here where you can build out their whole spiel is like you can build out applications with a short amount of time there. And just hit the ground running. And it's a very opinionative full stack framework there, but it will give you all the necessary tools to kind of get started. And so one thing is, if you find a project like this that you're really interested in, start to kind of dig around and do some basic Google searches and search on Twitter or LinkedIn or Mastodon or wherever people hang out and say like, okay, what are some content surrounding Redwood specifically? Or maybe there's a newer app framework. Like I just heard about a new Java framework called Hilla that was kind of on Twitter. I know Lawrence was talking about that on Twitter, and he was kind of promoting that, or AppWrite. I know that's just been kind of floating around, which is another tool for creating backends there. And so all of these different tools, find something that you're actually interested in, you want to play around with, build something really cool in public there, and tag the community, and not only tag the community, tag the company there and say like, oh, cool, I've built this really cool e-commerce app, or I've built this really cool app that helps, pets or, with health or something like that. Build a very unique project in public, share it. And not only do you get a really cool portfolio piece and you learn some new skills, but then also you're kind of becoming known as a content creator, and you're building out your profile, because there's tons of, beginner tutorials or just like the basic tutorials on how to use some of these tools. But companies spend a lot of money to get their name out there and try to go to conferences, trying to do workshops and have people within their teams give workshops. But then if you're already out there and you're like, hey, I want to play around with these different tools, I want to build some really cool projects, because a lot of these tools, they've been around for a minute. Maybe they haven't been around super, super long as like React or something like that, or Angular, but they've been around for a couple of years there, but they're still trying to gain traction. They're still trying to gain more traction within the community. and they're paying a lot of people trying to get their information out there. And if you come up and you build some really cool projects with it, you start sharing it on social media, you start tagging them, you start writing articles about them, and then people will start to notice you because they're like, wow, okay, you're using my technology and you're doing some cool stuff with the technology, and they might want to work with you. They might have some really cool opportunities for you. So that's another way to kind of boost your overall career profile, especially if you want to become a content creator where you want to build a following. And so that's one way that you can kind of stand out, because there's a lot of content creators of all different levels on YouTube and Twitch and on Dev2 and Hashnode and all this other stuff. And so sometimes it's hard to kind of break through all of that and say, like, how can I break through and make this as a full-time career? And so one way is to find interesting technologies that you're interested in, cool technology you want to play around with, and build some really neat, unique projects, not the same projects that everybody else kind of builds, but have a unique spin on it. And that will help you kind of stand out. And if you do that more often and you start getting more involved in writing articles and you exposing different, unique features about these technologies that maybe some of the other tutorials haven't exactly covered, these are some ways that you can, this is still part of contributing. So even though you're not contributing to the code base, you're still contributing to this project because you're bringing awareness about this project, and people are going to start to want to use that technology, be like, oh, look at this really cool project that so-and-so built with Redwood.js, and I want to check this out. Or they built with Hilla, or they built with AppWrite, or they built with, whatever. Like, there's so many different tools that are all competing for attention. And if you kind of step up and you're like, hey, I built something really cool with it, then that helps boost their profile, and everybody wins, quite frankly. So that's another way that you could kind of start building your own career. Now, this still takes time. It's not like you're gonna build like one project and you're gonna be like, bam, I'm a full-time content creator. Like, this takes several years there to go from your full-time job, whether it's a full-time developer at a company or maybe DevRel at a company, and then jumping ship and going to a full-time content creator. And that's what all especially the bigger content creators, if you think about like Learn with JSON, he worked for many years at different companies before he made the switch full-time to his own thing. And so there's plenty of people like that have slowly built up their profile, and open source is a great way for you to start doing that and start finding some unique projects that you want to get involved with. All right, so those are so we've so far talked about like two different ways to build out your career, whether it's with full-time content creation or even part-time content creation and DevRel and stuff like that. Another aspect is maybe you're actively looking to work at specific companies. Then that would be a more targeted approach where you would find that particular company there and say, like, if you want to work at Forum, which powers Dev2 or something like that, or Netlify, or any of those types of companies, and look at what kinds of open source projects that they have, kind of dig around within the community, see what their needs are, what are some cool features they could be involved with. Maybe they launch something within beta. You could user testing. That's a whole other way that you can get involved, because when people are releasing these new features and these new products, they need user testers. They need people to actually test this stuff out and give their feedback. And so you could jump in the ground floor there and start testing things out and creating some more issues and getting involved with the conversation. Say, hey, I tested out this product, but I had some questions about this, or this part didn't work as well, or wondering if we could expand on this and create XYZ, and that would add more value. And so that's another way that you could build your career as somebody that is able to add value to different companies and within the community and build out your profile. You could do that in the open with different open source projects. So now we're going to pivot into technical writing. Some of you might be interested in technical writing either as part-time, or maybe you want to do this full-time or as part of your content creation. So there's a lot of great repositories. So we're going to jump over to Astro, which has a great community, and they have a really nice refined contributing process. I know a few people within the community here in the virtual coffee community have participated and contributed to Astro, but you can find projects that are really friendly in terms of just, they have their stuff together. They have different discussion groups and discords. They have well-defined issues here. And so It looks like we have, yeah, so we have a lot of, good first issue bugs, but then also a lot for just improving the documentation. And they're actually really receptive to people coming in and offering their suggestions and saying, hey, I wish we could add this in the documentation. I wish we could talk more about this. They want people to jump in. They're actively looking for people. And so this is another way that you could get started with a project and start, tackling some of these issues, improve documentation, or getting involved within the Discord and discussions group, and start pitching, first, of course, looking at Astro and understanding how all that works. And so I would definitely go back and, play around with the docs and play around with Astro itself. But then you can start to get slowly but surely get involved within the community and start to give back that way and say like, hey, I really want to start writing some more articles about some cool things I built with Astro or some cool things that I've done within the open source community. And that starts to build your profile as a career, and you start to form your brand on like what kind of developer that you want to be known for within the community. And then people will start kind of looking for your expertise and say, hey, I found you because you were talking about these cool things you're doing this XYZ project. And so Astro, I think, is a great way to get started. And there's plenty of these types of projects out there where you can start building your profile and start writing articles on sites like Dev2 or Hashnode or Medium or freeCodeCamp or your own blog. And so these are great ways that if you're not really sure where to get started, get started with a tool that you use or tools that you've heard about and you want to play around with it, and then write about your experience and say, maybe this is your first time, we're picking on Astro right now, but is this your first time, working with Astro? Write an article about it. Be like, hey, I kept hearing about this in the community. I built this really cool tool with it. I built this really cool app with it, and start getting involved with the documentation, and you're going to open up so many other doors and meet some really cool people and start to kind of craft your career that way. And people are going to more and more going to start reading your writing, and if you're consistent with it, then you're going to start to develop a brand, and people are going to start to seek you out and ask you like, hey, can you write for us? Because they're going to see your profile as a writer, and they're going to start to pay you to write articles. I mean, that's what happened with me, where I was writing for freeCodeCamp, starting off initially as a volunteer, and then people started reaching out from Gatsby, and they're like, hey, we found your freeCodeCamp articles, and we wanted to pay you to write for Gatsby, and if you want to write articles here. And so like those are ways that you could start to build your technical writing career, whether you want to do it part-time or full-time. So open source is a great way to kind of get started with that. And so finding open source projects that align with your current goals is really the key there. And so this takes some time to just kind of study. I know in real time, we're not really studying in depth the repository, but you really want to get a vibe for the community. You want to get a vibe for the different discussions. What are certain things that they're looking for? Are they looking to build out their presence within the community? Are they looking to build out some really cool features? Do they have some sort of educational component? Do they need help with that? And so every single project, they have their own values and needs. And so if you start to align with those, then everybody ends up winning at the end of the day. So that's another way that you can kind of build out your profile if you're interested more specifically within technical writing, and just getting involved with sites that really need help with documentation or really need help just pushing their particular product. You can write about that and build out your profile that way. And then people will start to kind of notice you because they're like, oh yeah, you keep popping up in the open source community for months and months and months on end. We really want to start working with you, and those will turn into paid opportunities. So another thing that we want to talk about is like maybe you're in the middle of your career, or maybe you're at the beginning of the career, but you want to be known specifically in one particular area like accessibility or a certain aspect of cybersecurity or testing or something like that. And you want to be known as like the go-to person. So that's going to involve, building out a profile and building out demonstrated proof that like you've been working within that area. But how do you get started with that? So one way you get started with that is through open source. And so I'm going to pull up, let's see if we can find, yeah, okay, so this is the right tab. So within the freeCodeCamp community, we have a few people that have certain expertise in certain areas like accessibility, like testing, and et cetera, like cybersecurity, et cetera. And so this is Bruce. He's been in the industry for, I think, 3 decades now, and I've just pulled up some of his closed PRs here, but he's really known as like our accessibility guy, and he's not currently on staff with us. He's like just one of our helpful moderators there, but he really lends his expertise, particularly within the accessibility field. And as you can see, he's been pretty busy with us, but he's been with us for a few years there, just kind of helping out and being involved within the community there, different accessibility issues he finds within the curriculum, within the different projects that we're involved with at freeCodeCamp. And so this is another way that you can build out your profile and be known in a specific area like accessibility or cybersecurity, or, you know, as a technical writer, whatever your situation is. You can start contributing in that way and start looking at certain issues and say, you know, we could really beef up our testing here, or I'm seeing some practices like that could be a little bit better. And if you are kind of like an expert within that area and you want to build out that profile, over time, more contributions to different projects, then that's going to build up kind of your status within this community, where people are like, oh yeah, this is the accessibility guy, you know. And obviously, you know, you could do other things and stuff like that, but sometimes it's nice to be kind of known for one particular area, and then people start reaching out to you and say, hey, could you talk about this, or could you come on my podcast, or could you know, come on my Twitch stream or YouTube, or could you come on my panel? We have an accessibility panel, we'd love for you to come on. And they can find your work online through open source projects. And so if you just start off with one small issue at a time, particularly in areas that a lot of projects struggle with, like accessibility, right? And so find certain areas that people are kind of struggling with and start to lend your expertise and build up your expertise. Maybe you're newer to the industry and you're like, I really want to be an accessibility expert, but I'm just starting. And so as you're learning, then you can align yourself with different projects and say, oh, actually, you know, this could be fixed, or this could be helped, or, you know, I was testing out this. You could open up issues and start a conversation. And so even as you're learning in real time, you can start to just build up your technical experience within that particular area and still start to become known as like that particular person, if that's your end goal, right? And so this is one way to kind of build out your profile, and then you can also write articles about the projects that you're involved with, and share it within social media sites like Twitter and like LinkedIn and Mastodon and Blue Sky and all that fun stuff. And you start to kind of be known as this type of person where it's like, oh, they have this type of experience, and it will lead to other opportunities down the road. And you never know, like some people have been invited to very large companies because of their expertise, because they've been demonstrated within the open source community, and they're like, I want to bring them onto my company, and they would make a great employee here and part of our team. And you could bypass a lot of the typical interview process, because you've already demonstrated the work that you can do, the value you can add within the community. So this is just one example. I've also brought up, if I could find it, here we go. So this particular project is Josh Goldberg's Create TypeScript app. And he's been creating a lot of issues here. I've contributed a couple of these issues there, but it's a cool little tool there that you can add TypeScript to your projects, and you can add get started quickly with the right tooling with TypeScript and testing and stuff like that. So right now he's looking for a lot of contributions. I think he's participating in Hacktoberfest. But one of the things I wanted to point out was there's a few things labeled specifically for testing. And so where we need some more tests, and a lot of projects, they need help with testing, right? And a lot of people need help with testing. Maybe they have a really cool tool, but they don't have the best of test coverage. And they're like, man, I don't feel super confident within testing, so I need help from the community. And so if you want to kind of be known within that area as like, the testing person or whatnot, and you want to build out your career that way, whether you're just getting started within the industry or you've been in the industry for a while and you really want to kind of be known for that particular area, there's plenty of projects that are looking for testing for help with test coverage and bettering their tests. Maybe they do have tests, but they could be a little bit better and more efficient there. And so you can start to jump into these different projects there slowly but surely, and over time start to build up that profile. It's like, oh, you're the testing person, you're the testing expert, can I ask you these questions? And you'll start to see that you're going to start to be asked on different panels. You're going to start to be maybe getting paid to write certain articles for different companies. Maybe companies will invite you on to work with them full time and stuff like that. So there's a few people that have decided to go down that route, and they're known for like Cypress testing and stuff like that, or you're just different end-to-end testing, and they've kind of aligned themselves with different companies there and products. But this is a great way you can kind of get started with that, is like just beefing up projects testing, because a lot of projects are in the same boat where they either have a few tests, or some of them are a little bit broken, and they need help with the basic tooling. And so if you have that type of expertise, or if you're looking or you're actively developing that type of expertise, then you can provide that within the form of open source contributions, not just within code, but also within writing about these particular projects and your involvement with those projects, and kind of grow your profile that way and grow your overall brand that way. So the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about is, you might be in the boat where maybe you've been working as a developer for a while, or maybe the end goal was always to start your own business, right? So maybe from day one, you're like, I want to start a startup, and I have this great product idea, and I have all these different ideas, but how do I gain traction? Or I have this really cool library I want to create, but how do I actually get my library out there in the world? Because there's a lot of different libraries out there competing for our attention. And so one way you can do that is with open source. So maybe you're interested in starting a consultancy, or maybe you're interested in starting a product-based company. Whatever your end goals are, business-wise, you could use open source to help you with that. And so the last thing we'll go to is Naomi's profile. And so Naomi has a really interesting story here. And so she started learning like a couple of months before I did in 2020. I believe in April of 2020. She was working in retail before that. And when the pandemic hit, she lost her job. So she was on an unemployment for a couple of weeks. And then she was like, you know what? I'm going to learn how to code, because why not? And so she started with freeCodeCamp, very quickly moved through that, then started contributing to freeCodeCamp initially with the documentation, and then started working on issues from there. And then she like dove headfirst into open source and has contributed, I think it's safe to say, quite a lot over the years. And so she's like crazy active, and she has like different Discord communities and stuff like that. And so she's a great teammate over at freeCodeCamp, but she also started her own consultancy, and she started finding clients initially through her work with open source. So she started contributing to different projects because she was really interested in being involved with different Discord communities. And then clients saw her work in real time and like, hey, okay, can you build this out for us? Or you built out this really cool tool, can you build something similar for us? And so that was a way for her to build out her own consultancy, and start with that, is because people saw her in real time, and they didn't have to question like, oh, can you build stuff? Like, it was clear, like she knew how to code, and she knew how to build very cool tools for different companies. And so people within the community started recommending her, and so she was able to launch her consultancy, and she still has that to this day. And so that could be your particular situation where you're like, I'm not really sure how to get started, I'm not really sure how to get clients, I'm not really sure how to get my product out there. You could start with open source and getting involved with in the community and getting your profile known. And then when you're ready to start that company and you're looking for your first few employees, because getting that first initial team is really important. You don't want to hire the wrong people and have the project fall apart before it even gets started. You want to have like the right team in place. And so as you're working on different open source projects, then you start to see how other people work in real time, and you're like, you know what, I would really like this person to work with me on my startup, and they can join you within that situation there. So that's pretty much it for my presentation. So we just covered a variety of different experiences, whether you're just getting started within open source, or you're in the middle of your career, you're looking to pivot, or you're looking to kind of grow out your brand, and what that means between like content creation and technical writing, or starting your own business, and how open source can help with that. So now I'm going to kick it back to Kirk, and we can kind of open up for questions there.
Thank you, Jessica. That was great. That was like I would say, as per your usual, that was very comprehensive. And I always appreciate that, because many folks are willing to like, oh, well, there's a couple things, but I really like how you like, no, let's like dive into this. Like, let's really see what's going on. Love the examples of actual folks just doing their own thing and like talking progression, like this person started here and now they're here and how they get into this. I think like having those real world examples is really good. So we're just not always in this like theoretical space. Um, so let's see, we have a few more people here who I'm going to say right now. So questions are opened up. You can either type them in chat or you can like use our usual hand raise function. And you can just ask Jessica directly. If you type them in chat, I'll read it out for you. But as we kind of get into that, one of the things I wanted to get started with is, so you mentioned like a couple different like there's a couple different roles here. Like you're completely new, or you're mid-level, or you're just trying to like specialize. You're just trying to find a thing. I would say, what would you recommend to the person who has limited time? So, like specifically within the constraints of like, I only get to do something like this for a couple hours a week max. What do you think their strategy should be? And what would you say is like a good trajectory for them to maybe like get to some tangible goals?
Yeah, that's a great question because for a lot of this, it does require a lot of time, especially if you're going to work on like a code base and pick up issues and whatnot. So if you only have like a couple hours a week there, that I would still suggest just joining the community and start really just listening to the community. And there's a lot of conversations that will go on there with like cool tools that they're building out, or new features that they've built out. And so start off with just listening and taking more, I would call it like a passive role, but just like, kind of observing like what is this open source community all about, what are they looking to achieve there, and then slowly but surely start to get involved with the conversation, because that's how I actually got started with freeCodeCamp. Is like I didn't start off with as a code contributor or writing articles at all. I just got started with the forum, and I joined the forum because I was learning how to code at the time. And so I just started slowly but surely like participating in answering questions or asking questions and getting involved within the conversations. And that's still, it's a form like contributing back to the community, and adding value, especially if you're answering questions or you see the same question asked over and over again. If you've kind of stuck around long enough, even on a couple hours a week, then you can say, hey, wait a minute, I've seen that, I know the answer to that, and I can start to answer that question and provide additional assistance. And so that was kind of my story, was like I got so involved as somebody that was like brand spanking new to programming within the freeCodeCamp forum, and I started seeing the same questions over and over again. So I started learning the different answers, particularly for those that were more industry experts that have been around longer, and around like career questions. I started seeing the same questions and answers from the more industry experts, and I was like, oh, okay, this is one of the common answers. And so I started being able to comment on that and provide value to the discussions that way, and to help me get noticed, and by Quincy, who had invited me on to start writing articles and become a moderator. So that would be my advice, is like just get involved within the open source community discussions. There's a lot of discussions about what's going on with their products and services and where they're hoping to go, and then also just asking questions and be like, hey, I'm just curious, like, are you interested in these types of features? Are you interested in expanding out this type of product or service or whatever? And starting those whole new conversations, and the maintainers will be happy to talk with you, and other community members will be happy. So you don't have to be on 8 hours a day and stuff like that if that's not your time constraints. But if you have something like a couple hours a week, just starting off within the community and kind of getting a feel like what it's all about, and like what their needs and values are, and slowly but surely starting to get involved within the conversations there and growing with them.
I love that. Yeah, that feels like a nice suggestion of like start with just reading, learning, like understand the mechanics of the community first. And I guess, yeah, reduces the friction from you. You're less nervous, some of these people, versus like sort of like the cold call on here's some code that I wrote. Don't judge me too harshly. Let's see. We have one comment here from Christian who says, thank you for being comprehensive. I'm switching careers into software engineering and I've always wanted to contribute to open source. Um, Specifically in testing, I don't have too much experience with it, but could I use open source to get more experience with it, or should I start by focusing on areas that I have expertise in? Great question, Chris. Jessica, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. And so like if you're interested in getting started with testing, but you're still learning about testing yourself, I think like if you're going through courses with testing, like that's a great start, but then you want to actually apply what you've learned in those courses. And so you can find a project that you're involved with, like we saw with Josh's project there, or even smaller projects that need help with testing. I know freeCodeCamp has a few help wanted issues, and so you can kind of poke around there and say like, okay, maybe I can start off with some smaller unit tests or end-to-end tests and apply some of those skills that I've been learning. And it boils down to like finding a healthy community first that's not going to be hostile to you and be like, why did you use that testing pattern? That was stupid. Like, you want to stay away from those communities. That's why you want to study the community at first, because not all open source communities are super friendly, unfortunately. And so you want to make sure that it's a healthy community that welcomes contributors of all levels. But when it comes to testing, like most projects are going to be grateful that you're interested in that and want to help out with that, because most projects need help with tests and whatnot, and they're not following always the best practices and whatnot. Like the test kind of works, or it's a little flaky, and it's like, okay, it works for this particular case, but it doesn't work for all these other cases, and it needs some work. So you can kind of get started with a couple of projects that you're interested in, and also reaching out to the community, reaching out to the virtual coffee community or any other communities you're a part of, and just say, hey, are there some really good repositories that maybe a little bit smaller, maybe not the large, React library or something like that, but a little bit smaller in nature that needs some help with testing, and your community will help point you in the right direction and give you some good suggestions, and just start to find some issues. Or even as you're testing, if you're playing around with the app or the tool, and you're like, this test seems to be a little bit flaky there, and so start contributing some issues that way. So whether it's not just a code contribution, you can start off with different issues and say, hey, I was testing this out, but this seems to be a little bit flaky. Maybe we could do something with the test. And the great thing about open source is, as opposed to if you're working full time at a company with some like closed source software, is like there's not strict deadlines and stuff like that, so you have the freedom of more time to kind of play around with things and work on different issues, as opposed to working full-time in a company with something with more closed source, where it's like, okay, here's a particular deadline, we're going to do a sprint, and then we've got to release this thing. And so that gives you some more time to kind of play around with testing and play around with this and say, oh, what about this or what about that. And you could be upfront and say, hey, I'm working and building out my profile as testing, and but I'm really interested in this area. And a good healthy community is going to still welcome that. A bad community is just going to shun you and be like, why did you write it like that? But we're going to stay away from those companies there. But yeah, that's a great question there.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great idea. Kind of bouncing off of that, I also had a question. It's on the topic of theme and like, what should I do at the start? The thing I get like very frequently in conversations with new folks is, what should I start working on? And the question is always usually from a perspective of like, well, there may or may not be things I like, but I also want to pick something that's relevant, and I don't want to waste my time. Like there's a fear of like, oh, well, the thing that I chose to learn is not relevant or not going to be relevant in the future. And people are trying to like, whatever I like, I want it to be useful, I want it to be practical, I want to be able to build a career out of it, so I don't want to make that mistake. So I would say, in the context of open source, do you think people should be optimizing for what seems to be in the now, or like in the zeitgeist, or erring more towards, well, I think this is a cool project, or I like this idea or concept, or some mix of both? Just interested to hear your take.
Yeah, I think it's a good question there. And I think like if you're more early on and you're trying to just sink your teeth into one particular area, like, so for me, I'm primarily a JavaScript developer, and so I've kind of trended towards more established JavaScript libraries like React and Vue and whatnot. And so I started finding open source projects that kind of aligned with that initially. But then once I started getting a little more comfortable and I felt more comfortable branching out, then I was like, well, maybe I want to play around with these other libraries, because within the JavaScript ecosystem, there's just tons of stuff to choose from. And so I think sometimes it's fine if you want to pick something that's like brand spanking new, if it aligns with your current goals. If your current goals is like, I need to get a job within the industry, then you do want to pick, tools that have been around in the industry that are currently popular within your particular like job market. And you can build out, experience with open source that way. And then you can start to kind of branch out and say, I want to kind of play around with this. This is, hot off the press, so to speak. It's a little more experimental, but this might be a little bit fun. And you can kind of build out your profile that way as somebody that's not and it's a great way to communicate to employers like, hey, I'm not afraid to like learn different technologies, particularly like if if your goal is to work for consultancies and stuff like that, then you do have to have that skill of being able to pivot in different directions based on whatever the client needs are. Because I worked for a consultancy for like a year and a half, and sometimes we're working in React projects or Angular or Vue or something completely different, and you just have to be able to pivot. And so that's another way you can build out your profile, just playing around with different technologies there. But yeah, I think it's a great question there.
Thanks. I see Chris has her hand up. Go for it, Chris.
Yeah, what if I want to just write code?
Yeah, that's great question too. So if you're just focused on, I just want to code, I just want to have some fun times, well, there's plenty of great repositories. I would always then just lean towards projects that you're really interested in, because I feel like you're going to more likely stick around long term. And there's nothing like horrible about making a couple of contributions to a project and then leaving. But if you could have like a couple of projects where you want to stick around for months and months on end, I think that's pretty cool, because you can help see that project grow, and then you can also anticipate certain issues that they might run into, and you might be more privy to like new features that are coming out or new things that are coming out in beta, and you can kind of help out with that, and whether it's bug fixes, whether it's smaller feature requests and enhancements and stuff like that. So if your goal is like, hey, I just want to build out my coding skills and stuff like that, I think that's totally fine. So just pick projects that you're interested in, or reach out to your community and be like, hey, what are some cool projects in XYZ technologies? Or you might want to start pivoting into, maybe you're a front end developer and you want to pivot more into back end, and you're interested in stuff like Java or C# or something like that, and you want to find some cool projects. And I would reach out to the community and be like, hey, this is my situation, I want to find some cool projects where I can focus mainly just on the code aspect of it, and kind of get started from there. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with just focus straight on the code. That's totally fine too, and that's a great way to grow your skill set there.
So how do I find the repos that have code problems?
Yeah. So like I would use the open source tool that I showed at the very beginning. I could drop it in the chat as well. Let's see. Yeah, if you type in, I think it's opensource.pizza. So let me grab that link. And you here we go. So and you start to use their insights feature and their explore feature, then you can pick your technologies of choice, and you can see the frequency if this repository is super active, or they're looking for a lot of code issues, and they're constantly building out this tool too. But I think that's super helpful to find projects that are specifically looking for code, and you can kind of go from there and start to find those repositories and just jump straight in there. And after reading the contributing docs, of course, start to pick off a lot of those projects. But I've kind of looked through some of the different projects that they've listed on there. I think they do a good job of filtering out different projects based on not only technologies, but like the needs of that particular individual. And you can find tons of just straight code issues. You can just jump straight into there.
Thanks.
I like it. Okay, there's a link in the chat, insights at opensource.pizza. That's hilarious URL. Okay, yeah, no, I think that was really wonderful. I know we have a mix of folks here, some who've been in the industry for a little while, but like everyone's sort of like excited for this open source season. And yeah, Jessica, I think you did a great job. I'm excited to try out some of these tools which I haven't used before. It's a weird thing to say, like, I feel like I haven't taken open source stuff super, maybe seriously isn't the word, but in this sort of like strategic way. There's been a lot of like, well, let's just go with the flow and see what happens, and that's fine. But it's also nice to have situations like this where you could just be a little more dialed in. And I think this is pretty cool, and I'm excited for it. With that, we are just about at the hour. So I'm gonna sort of do our wrap up right now. Just to be mindful of folks' times and kind of give things a neat little bow here. Once again, I want to say thank you so much to Jessica. Every time you talk, I learn something, which is really cool. I want to say thank you for everybody who came, everyone who asked questions, and we're just like supporting this whole thing. Honestly, open source and Oktoberfest is just one of those things that like generally feels good in tech when there's a lot of things in tech that are weird or sketchy or dubious, or you're like, that's not a great idea. This thing where people are like, hey, I want to work on something cool. I'd like to support other people working on something cool. I want to polish my skills in an environment that doesn't feel harsh. So it's just a nice thing. And I'm really happy that we got to have this little small slice of it. But yeah, we're doing so much more for the rest of the month. Anyone here, if you would like to do one of these talks, that's always just an ongoing thing. You can just reach out to us, or there's a form in the VC Slack. If you're watching this online, check out virtualcoffee.io for more information about this and any other cool projects that we do. Once again, my name is Kirk, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Yeah.